sexologist, Dr. Kate Edwards. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm very excited about the guest that we have, Dr. Erika Pluhar. Dr. Pluhar is a certified sex therapist, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and licensed professional counselor. She provides individual, couple, and sex therapy at Whole Heart Psychotherapy in Atlanta, Georgia, where she is the co-clinical director. Thank you so much for joining me, Erika.
You're very welcome. I'm happy to be here.
I'm very excited about today because I think that people are afraid to talk about sex.
It's amazing, and even in this day and age where sex is all over the media, it's used to sell various products from toothpaste to cars to everything, yet actually having an honest conversation, let alone with a partner, is super hard for many people.
Yeah, it really is. And I'm hoping that today we'll be able to at least get people to realize that they can have honest and wholehearted conversations with their partner about this.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
Anything we can do to help that cause.
Right? I think I'm so excited, so thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I thought we would start with, what do you do as a sex therapist? Because I don't even think that many people know that there's something like that out there.
Right, and then there are a couple of media examples
Right.
from movies and films that are not the most accurate. So what I do is basically facilitate conversations about sex and sexuality. So people will come to me for a variety of sexual concerns, including low desire or desire discrepancy with a partner, pain during sex, difficulty having an orgasm, erectile difficulty, rapid ejaculation, history of sexual trauma or abuse, lots of different things. Bring them in the door, and a lot of times that causes relationship difficulties.
Yeah.
So not only are we addressing what's going on sexually or not going on sexually, but helping unpack some of the relationship problems that can either be a cause of or exacerbate or as a result of some of the sexual difficulties.
I think that's amazing, and I bet that there are so many people that could benefit from it, and they don't even realize it.
Yeah, my joke with myself about this career path was like, this was the best non-business decision because I just wanted to talk about sex in an honest way, and started out doing this in undergrad and doing sexuality education, and the more I talked about it with people, the more I wanted to learn, the more I realized there was to know. And lo and behold, there's a real market for people who need this kind of facilitation and help.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. I can only imagine. I mean, I think about what sex means to one person can mean something completely different to the other.
Totally, yeah. I mean, that's a lot of times that's where we start is, what is sex? What is sexuality to you? And people kind of think of it as in a very narrow way, oftentimes just as intercourse, for example, but when we look at it broadly, it's woven into so many aspects of our life.
Yeah, how do people even answer that question? Because if you were to ask me that, I'm not sure I would know how to answer it.
People answer it in a variety of ways. I'm also trained as a sexuality educator, and there's this great exercise called a concept map where we put the word sexuality in the middle in a bubble, and then we draw these branches off of it, and it comes into all kinds of things like our values, our bodies, our body image, our religious upbringing, are the ways in which we communicate, laws even. So there's so many ways in which it's beyond just a behavior. Emotions, intimacy, connection with a partner.
Yeah.
So people define it in all different ways and express it in all different ways.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure they do. I mean, for me, I know, and I'm sure my husband will love me bringing this up. He always loves watching these. He's like, what did you say? But I know that for me, connection is such a huge part of my sexuality.
Yeah.
And I know that if I don't feel connected, I don't really want anything to do with it.
And that's really common, especially for women, to say that. But not just for women. I think a lot of men in relationships, really, or not in relationships, who are seeking to be in relationships, who want to have connected sex.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is a really key element, that emotional connection. Feeling like you're in sync with another person and somebody else is dancing with you in that sense.
I love how that sounds, how someone else is dancing with you, being able to kind of understand who you are
Yeah.
outside of that world and then bringing it together.
I was playing some music with some people last night, and
Uh-huh.
I'm just getting into music, and my fiance is a musician, and
Oh, cool.
I said on the way home, that feeling of being in sync with other people like that,
Uh-huh.
I was like, that's why people like sex too, because
Yes!
it's like you're creating something that's bigger than just what you have in the parts.
Oh, yeah, that makes complete sense. I just love that metaphor.
Yeah.
What do you think, how can people talk about it at home a little bit better? What would be ways that we could have an honest conversation with our partner, or at least begin it? Because obviously many people will need to talk to somebody like you to go further into the conversation, but how can we even broach the subject if we're a little bit scared about it or fearful around it?
Yeah, that's a great question, because the people that come to me are usually in significant distress or have waited a long time, and so they really need help in facilitating problem solving, conflict resolution. But for folks out there that are not, or that just may want to enhance their sexuality, their sex life with their partner, and just open a dialogue that they maybe haven't had before, I'm a big fan of sentence stems, like a few little ways to just start conversations. So for example, one thing I really like about our sex life is ...
Okay.
My sexuality is ... I would love for my sexuality or our sex life to include ...
Okay.
So just little prompts like that, but always to start with something that's positive. I like the sandwich formula. Right? Start with something that's positive, add a request, and then end with something that's appreciative.
Isn't that the Southern sandwich?
It is a Southern sandwich.
I'm from New York, so I had no idea what that was prior to moving here, but now I understand.
Yes.
Okay, well,
Sweeten it up.
Sweeten it up.
I'm a northerner too.
Yeah.
I've been here 2 decades.
Well, I think that changes it a little, but you at least understand
Right.
the Southern sandwich. That's great. It sounds like it might be a good journaling activity for someone to work on it first before they
Yes.
broach it with their partner.
Yeah, absolutely. I think know thyself, that adage applies so well if you're wanting to explore sexuality with your partner or yourself, is to just kind of think through, like, what did I learn about sex and sexuality growing up? Where did I get my values? Where did I get my beliefs? Are they values and beliefs that are congruent with how I'm living now or want to live now? What's a term we use in sex therapy is erotic script. So
Okay.
what are your turn-ons? What are your turn-offs? What's your go-to fantasy? There's so many ways that you can kind of get to know yourself, and then you can bring that to a dialogue with a partner.
That's a great idea. That's very good. Okay. Well, I think that'll be a great way for you guys to at least start. Think about pulling out a journal and see if that's something you can do to build your own confidence around it.
And there's some great resources, too, now available. Some books that I really love and podcasts. And so really great ways to cue thinking about and talking about sexuality.
What are some of those books that you might suggest?
So 2 of my favorite books are Because It Feels Good by Deborah Herbenick.
Okay.
She's at University of Indiana at the Kinsey Institute. Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski, and she's at Smith, a sex educator, and wrote a phenomenal book a couple years ago about women's sexuality, but really like everyone's sexuality. I think it applies.
Sure.
Esther Perel is a big speaker in our field now, and she's got a couple TED Talks about sexuality. Her book is called Mating in Captivity, Reconciling the Domestic with the Erotic.
Oh,
Has a TED Talk based on that, a TED Talk based on her research on infidelity, and a new book on infidelity.
Okay.
And then she has this podcast series where she does live sessions with couples.
Oh,
To
really?
me, it's kind of like therapy porn.
Yes.
So
Why
I
is
listen to
that?
it while I'm running, and I'm like, this is so entertaining and awesome.
Oh, I love it.
But there are some of the episodes that I actually share with clients and say, you might see yourself in this. Like,
Yeah.
listen to the spin that she put on this, or listen to the way the person was speaking about their experience with sex or their difficulties with sex. And I think that can be helpful and empowering to continue that dialogue.
Well, and see that you're not alone. I mean,
Right.
to listen to that on a podcast.
That is the biggest thing. I think most people come into my office feeling like that, feeling alone, ashamed, broken, and to know that they're not alone, that there are other people that are having those struggles and difficulties or asking those questions, And then the quintessential question with sex is often, am I normal?
I never would have thought about that, but it makes complete sense.
It's like at the heart of everyone's questions, I think. If you boil it down to the question within the question, many people want to know, am I normal?
Do you think that it has to do with how the media sensationalizes sex? Or what do you think, or where do you think that comes from?
Yeah, I think it's probably that combination of sensationalizing and idealizing a certain way.
Yeah.
And so then you put in, religious messages sometimes for people, or other societal messages. So many families, like I'll ask people, how did you learn about sex and sexuality, or what were the messages and values?
Yeah.
And the answer is, I didn't really get much.
I didn't.
But that's a message in and of itself.
Yeah, that's true.
Silence about it, I think, sets us up for not knowing what is normal, quote unquote, or thinking that something is wrong that we're doing when there's no dialogue or no reference point.
Wow, that's really powerful. I never have thought about that. So do you talk about it with your children?
Absolutely.
How do you do that?
Yeah, so I think one of the myths about this parenting and sexuality education process that we go through is that it's a conversation.
Uh-huh.
It's not. It's multiple conversations. It starts very early, from naming body parts, from just being open about bodies, and being non-shaming. And I started out really when my kids were babies. Like, that's your penis, and these are the girl parts, and talking about privacy. Mm-hmm. And then I've had my kids we've had multiple books. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite stories was when my probably 3-year-old at the time was talking to a relative.
Oh no.
And the relative said something like, "Where do babies come from?" And my boy said, the relative said, "In the mommy's belly." And my boy was like, "No, the uterus."
Yes, winning.
Sex educator mom win right there.
That's a huge win.
Yeah, and then my kids have also been enrolled in the Unitarian Universalist Church. It has a great program called Our Whole Lives.
Uh-huh.
It's K through adult education, like comprehensive sexuality education.
Wow.
So my older child has been through that twice, and the younger one once.
Okay.
And it's all age appropriate, comprehensive. Like family structures and good communication in a relationship, how to be a friend. So that broad concept again, as well as these are your sexual body parts, and this is what sex is, and how babies are made, and some of those more basic biological things.
I mean, I think that that's fantastic, looking at it from that holistic, huge component, because like we said, for me and for many people, it's so much about communication. And if the communication is lacking, then the actual activity, the sexual activity, does not occur.
Right.
And so teaching them about the communication and the relationship building sounds amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it's cool to have these other little wins where, my 10-year-old saying, on the bus, people were saying this word or that word. And I'm like, well, what do you think about that? Or did you know that? And he's like, yeah, I knew that.
Oh, that's really
or I knew, like, the, quote, accurate version of that. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, when I was 18, that's when I got my sex talk.
So you got the talk.
I got the talk. And I remember it very clearly, and it was incredibly embarrassing. And I think that there was a lot of shame around it because of the way that it was done. And I mean, it was not meant to be that way.
Right.
But I remember I was sitting on the stairs, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, you're 18, we need to talk about the birds and the bees. And I was like, really? Right now?
Yeah.
I already know.
Right. Now it's just awkward and weird.
Why are you doing this to me? And I think a lot of people go through things like that.
Oh, yeah. So many people have that kind of memory.
Yeah.
If I was sitting at the table and...
So it would be a good idea to just talk about it in everyday life and never having one major life-altering conversation.
Yeah. And there are some phenomenal resources there as well for parents. My favorite books are these cartoon books by Roby Harris. Uh-huh. And the first one is, I think, 7 and under. It's Not the Stork.
Okay.
And then it goes, It's So Amazing, and then It's Perfectly Normal.
Ah.
And so it's a wonderful series. My kids have loved looking at those.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go buy it. I'm going to buy the first one. I mean, my son's only 4, but it would be a great way to start, because I don't want to have I don't want him to have the terrifying memory that
Right,
I
and I
do.
just leave them around. Like, they're
Yeah.
just part of everyday life.
Okay. Oh, that's really cool. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
I didn't know we were
welcome.
going to talk about it. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit more about the emotional components of sex?
Mhm.
So, because again, I think that that's very important. We could talk a little bit about the physiological in a moment, but just really the
Yeah.
emotional components.
Absolutely, yeah. So as human beings, we are evolutionarily hardwired to attach for survival.
Yeah.
So we need closeness. We have decades of research on attachment and how we bond with other people and why we bond with other people. And so for many, many people, there's a huge link between that kind of bonding and sex and sexuality.
Yeah.
Certainly there can be unemotional sex or detached sex, and a lot of people have that kind of experience. But for a lot of people who are in relationships, the emotional closeness piece is a big part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And like we were talking about earlier, especially a lot of women talk about, like, this does not work without feeling connected and close.
Right.
And then men will often say, and it's not always gendered like this.
Right.
So a lot of times in my experience, it's the reverse in my practice. Men will often say, or another partner will often say, well, but that's how I get close.
Yeah.
And so then you have this conundrum of, like, chicken and egg, which comes first, the
Right.
closeness or the sex. And so I will often help couples work through that difference as well.
Oh, yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. And then what about people who experience pain?
Yeah.
I think that is a huge thing, because I work with pain from a physical therapy standpoint every single day.
Right.
But we also know that pain is a multifaceted experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's so much about how we frame things.
Absolutely.
And not necessarily what's happening physically.
Yeah.
So do you get a lot of people that have painful sex? And
I do.
How do you work with that?
Yeah, that's been a subspecialty of mine over the years. And I work with a lot of pelvic floor physical therapists.
Yes. Oh, that's how we
know each other.
That's how.
And OBGYNs who are often the point person for making that referral.
Okay.
So the best way to sum this up is the combination that is evidence-based that supports treating pain with sex is couple and sex therapy, pelvic floor physical therapy, and then the medical or physical piece.
Okay.
So those three things need to be in place
Okay.
for successful outcomes usually. So it depends on who a person is seeing first. Like, if I am the first contact to talk about it, I will often refer to a pelvic floor PT or another medical professional to look at what's going on with the pelvic floor, to look at, are there any causal factors medically that need to be treated. But then in my office, what we do is talk about that mind-body connection. We talk about the influence of thoughts on pain. We talk about the influence of the relationship dynamic on pain, because usually by the time, unfortunately, people get to my office, it's been going on for a really long time.
Right.
And somebody is gritting her teeth and just trying to get through sex. And so then we have a pain and avoidance cycle instead of a pleasure and anticipation cycle. So I really try to help. And it's not uncommon also, unfortunately, for couples not even to be touching at all, because the fear part is that if we even hold hands, it could lead to sex, which could lead to pain. So yeah, I do a lot of work in the relationship and with the person who's experiencing pain, him or herself, to reframe, to reset, so that we can have more of a pleasure cycle eventually. And a lot of times that looks like, just let's take genital sex off the table right now for a period of time. If that's pain and avoidance cycle has been going on for so long, they really need a reset a lot of times. Yeah. And that can be both relieving and panic-inducing depending on which partner it is.
Yeah.
Although the partner who's not experiencing pain with sex is often really emotionally impacted as well. Might feel very rejected, might feel very anxious about hurting the partner, conflicted about even needing something that might hurt the partner. So there's a lot of complicated emotional dynamics to work with, and that's why couple and sex therapy is such a important component of that triad with treatment.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I don't think you could treat it without it.
Right.
especially like we said, everything that we know about pain. If you don't
Yeah.
talk about it
Yeah.
and you don't really dive deep into the emotional component, I don't know how it could get better.
Right.
I think that now people have a good understanding of what you do and what they can do if they need help.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's talk a little bit about what the benefits of sex are. So
Yeah.
what are the physical benefits, the physiological, and the emotional benefits? I know there are a lot of all of them.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we talked earlier about attachment
Mm-hmm.
and emotional closeness. That can certainly be one of the benefits. Is sex can be, when it's working really well, like glue between two people. It can really facilitate a bond.
Yeah.
It can be a way of personal expression, creative expression.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a way to, it can even be a pain reliever.
Mm-hmm.
Oxytocin. So the cuddle hormone, it's called,
Yeah.
when we are close with another person and or when we go through a sexual response cycle and have an orgasm, our brains release a chemical called oxytocin, and it can actually help relieve pain.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing.
It is incredible.
Yeah. It can be physical exercise, potentially how
Yes.
active you are. It can just be fun.
Right.
And a stress relief.
Mm-hmm.
So there are lots and lots of benefits of
Yeah.
sex.
I think so, and I think that those are the things that aren't talked about. So
Right.
I really appreciate having this open and honest conversation about it so that maybe it'll take some of the stigma out of it and people will be able to have an open conversation at home.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Yeah. Is there anything else you would like to tell the audience or you think that they would benefit from or could know about that we haven't talked about?
I would just return to the encouragement at the beginning of our discussion to open a dialogue.
Yeah.
I think that's, I get asked a lot, how can I spice up my sex life? How can I create desire again? And just start the dialogue. You don't have to have the exact same right words. You don't have to even know where you're going, but just open it up.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate this, and I know the audience is going to love this episode.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much for watching, everybody. I hope that you learned a lot. If you would like to reach Dr. Pluhar, you can reach her at wholeheartpsychotherapy.net or erikapluhar.com. Thank you so much. Talk to you later.